I know, right? A nearly 27-year-old game, and I'm just now playing it? I must live under a rock.
Who are you people?
I'll go into why it took me this long to pick up the game in a bit, but before that, I'm sure you're all wondering, what do I think? Oh, it's so good. Sweet Arceus, this game is so fun. I severely missed out. So I'd like to go over a few talking points about my first impressions of the game. I had the pleasure of sharing this experience with some of you live, but now to compile all my thoughts into a single video. Also, something to be aware of, the collectathon genre for me really starts with Donkey Kong 64. Love it or hate it, the two games hold a lot of similarities. So for a game I've played for 25 years, DK64 is kind of my reference point while absorbing Banjo Kazooie. Let's start off with the challenges in this game. Overall, I feel like Banjo Kazooie pushes the player an appropriate amount. A large majority of the jiggies or musical notes are fairly straightforward and easy to collect. Maybe there's a few that require more effort or trial and error. And honestly, the big three pain-in-the-butt jiggies would be Racing Clanker, Mr. Vile, and the Engine Room. It's not like DK64 shoving two beaver bothers in a single world. At the very least, the challenges feel pretty spread out. An aspect of this game that I was not anticipating was collecting the musical notes. I played this on original Nintendo 64 hardware. No emulation, no save states, no Xbox version. The original copy played as intended. Oh boy, I did not realize I needed to collect all of the notes and Jinjos before leaving the world or dying. Otherwise, I would have to start from scratch and collect it all again. Thankfully, everyone in chat gave me a good warning from the start. I think given today's standards in gaming, this design feels more hardcore than intended. I'm relieved to know the Xbox version has adjusted this so the player's progress is saved. I mean, could you imagine needing to collect all 500 colored bananas in a DK64 world? That would be insane. But I think back to the 90s and this design of beating a high score. It's that kind of push to make the players even better, and to really explore the world more to see it all. But this also led to a rude awakening about how easy it is to die in this game. I mean, not easy, but perhaps I got too comfortable with the tag barrel. Every time you hop in, your health is fully restored. I rarely ever think about my health bar. But sheesh, the number of close ones I pulled in Banjo, it's kind of embarrassing. Well, it's actually embarrassing how many times I died due to self-harm. On the one hand, I really like how enemies don't respawn and honeycombs don't fade away if you don't collect them. However, there were plenty of times when I became desperate to restore my health and just couldn't make it happen. It's a tough system, but I think I can forgive this system considering how I felt it prepared me for that final boss fight against Gruntilda. And last, I want to talk about how much I enjoy the Jinjo system. It reminds me a lot of the 5 Kasplats per world in DK64. That guarantee of a special Jiggy piece to obtain once collecting all 5 Jinjos. And much like Kasplats, they are color-coded, so it's easy to keep track of which ones you've saved and which ones are still out there. Even their little help call-out is silly, but really helpful in trying to find them. A simple sound cue like that alerts the player so that they can take a step back and look around. For the longest time, I was wondering what other purpose these Jinjos had other than providing a Jiggy piece. Once I made it to the ending, I was very pleased to see that mighty Jinjonator take down Gruntilda. Gameplay-wise, I'm thrilled to say this game holds up. Overall, it feels good to play Banjo and Kazooie. Their movements feel synced up to the controller, with some minor hiccups here or there. It isn't like Super Mario 64, where I'm less confident about moving and jumping. And that's not to hate on Mario 64, we all love that game, but it was simply an observation while playing Banjo. And of course, with my background with Donkey Kong 64, you already know I love the parallels with Orang Stand to Talon Trot and Simian Spring to Shock Spring Jump. You can even go as far as adding Diddy's Rocket Barrel jetpack to Kazooie's flight. It might be more of a me problem, but I really wish the controls for these abilities were parallel as well. Throughout the entire gameplay, I was always hitting the wrong button combination for Talon Trot because it's different from Orang Sprint, or constantly forgetting what button activates Shock Spring Jump because, again, it's different from Simian Spring. But I am a major dummy, so don't roast me too badly in the comments. With that being said, I do love that the two games share ability pads. My tiny brain immediately knew what to do and what to look for. I particularly loved all of the different transformations provided by Mumbo. I'll go into the characters next, but this was a twist from the game that I was never expecting. It's such a fresh idea, playing as a completely different character to further advance in the game. The way that it provides a different moveset, plays differently from Banjo and other transformations, as well as being able to explore parts of Grunty's lair is brilliant. In a way, it's like playing as the animal buddies in DK64, but more, a lot more. A part of me wishes that a transformation was available for every single world, but I'm sure that takes a whole lot of planning and designing a world. I'm actually quite satisfied by how many transformations exist in the game, but it is a little odd how large of a gap exists from the first transformation to the second. My major nitpicks with the gameplay certainly focus around flying. In some aspects, I actually find the controls to be a tad smoother in comparison to Diddy's rocket barrel. However, aiming the beak bomb attack is a whole different story, and was the result of most of my deaths. It's one of those abilities where, I might be able to avoid using it for the most part. Those evil snowmen and Frizizi Peak don't have to be taken out, but the flying phase against Grunty is absolutely required. That's when I knew I was in big trouble and seriously needed to lock in. But I can agree that it's one of those things you keep practicing at and you should see improvement. Another small nitpick I have is firing those eggs. In this economy, it can get really tough to aim Kazooie properly. Not nearly as tough as aiming Beak Bomb, but there were some small hiccups with eggs. I actually really like that Kazooie is able to aim forward and backwards. I haven't seen Chunky poop out a pineapple before. And aiming isn't all that bad, but there were moments when I would have loved to shift into first-person view to get more accurate. But I'm grateful to know this has changed for Tooie. If I'm to bring up one more nitpick, it would be the camera. And honestly, it feels kind of pointless to bring up because just about every game on this console had cameras that were frustrating to control. You know how it is, it's the kind of movement that throws you off when you weren't expecting it and fall to your death. It's fine. Everything's fine. It's fine. Going into this game pretty blind, I had very little idea of who these characters are and what their personalities would be like. Other than the obvious bear and bird on the box art, and of course the Wicked Witch of Spiral Mountain, I couldn't really tell you what I was anticipating. Good guys or bad guys, playable or non-playable, this game provides an interesting and exciting cast of wacky characters. Starting with our heroes, Banjo and Kazooie, of course, I really like how the two are different from each other. They have their own playful personalities. Banjo being the sweet, lovable, positive, let's go save my sister kind of guy, versus Kazooie with her wisecracking, sassy comments, taking no one's crap. It's a duo that works really well and offers entertaining dialogue between the two of them and other characters. Then we have the support characters, which are significant to progressing in a game. And I like how gaining abilities range from collecting enough tokens to just find the guy who will teach it to you. The abilities they offer the player are obviously unique, but it's the entertaining back and forth dialogue between Bottles and Kazooie that really makes things interesting. But anyways, Bottles and Mumbo provided a level of excitement for each new interaction. Each world I would enter, I was eagerly wondering if a new ability or transformation was waiting for me. And while this might be more of a discussion on gameplay, I still think the abilities were cleverly designed around the characters. A simple ability like Talon Trot is extremely useful, but it always cracks me up how Kazooie just takes over and Banjo is left dangling behind her. Even simple challenges like when to use Kazooie's eggs, but the challenge requires shooting from behind. It's those extra levels of detail we love out of Rare. So while Bottles and his ability upgrades were kind of expected, it was Mumbo's transformations that were completely new and unexpected for me. It's kind of impossible for me to pick a favorite transformation because they were all so lovable and incredibly fun. Each one provided either an easier mode of transportation for the world or new methods of troubleshooting problems. Some even provide an incredible twist, like the bee flying, or the pumpkin getting flushed down the toilet. You know what? Nope, it's the pumpkin. That's my favorite transformation. So, of course, with my background with DK64, I kind of stayed alert to the idea that changing characters will allow me to access different areas of the game. Knowing that Mumbo's magic hangs on just a little bit outside of the world's entrance is a neat way to tell the player, hey, this new pumpkin you're playing as can do something Banjo can't. Go figure it out. I would love to go on and on about more of the common enemies throughout the game, or even unique characters like the Jingjos or Bruntilda, but we can't forget about the main baddie of the game, Grunty herself. Speaking from personal experience, I never found her quite as intimidating as K. Rool, Bowser, or Ganondorf. But that being said, I never played this as a kid, so my level of imagination or nostalgia hasn't been influenced as much as those previous antagonists. And I don't think that really matters as much because 1, this ended up being one heck of a boss fight, and 2, this game has more of a playful, cartoony style. Hearing that mocking laughter and banter throughout her lair is effective to this style. Even the build up to the end of the game was unlike anything I've ever seen before. In order to free Tooty, I was expecting a long epic boss fight like in DK64. But no, around the corner awaits Grunty's Furnace Fun, a wacky minigame filled with mind-bending puzzles to test the player. I will admit it took me a long time to clear this out, and when I finally made it to the end, Grunty just walked away. Alright, cool, roll credits, we saved the day. In the back of my head, I just knew there was no way we were finished. This little party with Bottles and Mumbo was far too early. We still got work to do. We could talk about the final boss fight against Gruntilda all day, but for now, I just want to bring up how hysterical this lead up is to one of the most stressful boss fights I've experienced in a while. The different phases are such a great test for the player to show what they've learned through their adventure, whether it be on land, in the sky, or just pooping out eggs fast enough. And as for Grunty's character, I love this shift in her confidence when she realizes the mighty Jinjonator is capable of crushing through her invincible shield. This witch is no more. The worlds of Banjo Kazooie are some of the most memorable in gaming. Something that I really appreciate about the worlds is how comfortable they are in size. I'm not sure if it has to do with age, but I'm becoming less and less fond of games with massive maps. Massive overworlds, massive levels. Today, I would much rather a game be compact with a well thought out layout than a massive sized game with little to do in between. It's far less overwhelming, but I think devs can get really creative with their worlds. Take a world like Creepy Castle. There's plenty to do on the outside, yeah, but they packed so much more on the inside too. I love this method of breaking out a world. Something that I would like to praise Banjo for accomplishing is creating water worlds that aren't the absolute worst. Water worlds in general tend to be hated amongst fans after all. It's not the easiest kind of world to design. Clanker's Cavern and Rusty Bucket Bay are clearly the more rough worlds, and I'm sure they would sit near the bottom of most people's tier list. But besides Raising Clanker and the engine room in Rusty Bucket Bay, these worlds aren't all that bad. The amount of time required to dive underwater is nothing in comparison to Gloomy Galleon. They are water levels without the dread of water levels, in some ways. Truth be told, the biggest eyesore with these two worlds are the more stressful Jiggy pieces. But otherwise, I kinda like the design of these two worlds. So I'd like to take a moment to highlight Click Clock Wood. It seems like fans are a little divided with this world, and I can understand why, but I was so impressed during my first playthrough. It feels very ambitious for its time, considering the massive size and 4-season gimmick. But I think they pulled off a solid world, and a final world at that. The last world has to be memorable. It's really interesting how the world is divided into 4 rooms, one for each season, instead of a design like Fungi Forest where the player can flip a switch to adjust the world. But regardless, the gimmick is still there and it's a neat one. All those little details to pay attention to, like when to enter Fate Conquer's home, the incomplete treehouse during summer, or timing out when to visit the beaver. So much effort was put into this world, and it certainly shows because it took me over 3 hours just to complete this one world. I think save states would have gone a long way here for me, but I still really enjoy the world. And just to go back to Fungi Forest, knowing that it was originally built for Banjo Kazooie and was later picked up for DK64 was a great decision in my opinion. Well, not a decision, the devs ran out of time for Banjo, but I still think it was for the best. It's one of my favorite worlds in DK, and I think another forest-like world would have been overkill in Banjo, especially with another massive world that is Click Clock Wood. It really goes without saying, but the music in Banjo is incredible. No, but really, without a doubt, this is some of Grant Kirkhope's best work. It's really hard for me to not think about DK64 at times. I mean, gosh, can you blame me? There are some strong similarities. But that being said, DK takes more of a darker direction. Not just in music, but also in lighting, story, characters. The score for Banjo keeps things pretty light and energetic. I think considering this game is more focused on a cartoony vibe, the score matches its silliness. Even for a spooky world like Mad Monster Mansion, the Halloween vibes are still present without trying as hard to scare the crap out of the kids playing. Not like Creepy Castle going all in with those low moans and screams. Something that I really enjoyed about the game was the music and sound guessing game from Grunty's Furnace Fun. I mean, the entire minigame alone is a clever way to test the player and see how well they know the game after putting in many hours. But the sound aspect of the minigame was particularly clever to me. I struggled the most with the character sound bites. They just sound a little too close to one another to me, and also I'm awful with names, so I was really leaning on chat to help me out. The music, on the other hand, I was more successful with, and it probably helps that the music has themes that make it easy to associate it to a world. I mean, what other world has a beachy steel pan vibe other than Treasure Trove Cove? Something that really popped out to me about the music is how it kept my spirits up during some of the biggest challenges in the game. This goes for Donkey Kong 64 as well, a strong example being Gloomy Galleon and Crystal Caves. For me, at least, those two worlds are some of my least favorites to explore. Even if we don't agree specifically about these two worlds, it seems like someone's favorite is someone else's least favorite, and vice versa. Doesn't matter, the music of these worlds are so catchy, luscious, and memorable. And I feel this way towards Clanker's Cavern and Rusty Bucket Bay. Two worlds that I would argue are probably my least favorites of the game, but those tunes kept me going. Do you know how many times I attempted the engine room? It was a lot, but my motivation to clear this challenge stayed high, and I thank the score for this. Alright, so now the big question I'm sure you're all wondering. How did it take me this long to play Banjo Kazooie? I mean, what gives? I've played other rare classics like DK and Diddy Kong Racing. We covered this while I was streaming the game, but I think it comes down to word of mouth. You gotta think back to the 90s and early 2000s. We were playing these games well before the internet became an established place for information. So if a video game wasn't among a group of friends or family, how would you hear about this? Well, there were E3s or magazines like Nintendo Power, but hey, I grew up in a pretty sheltered home. It kinda came down to word of mouth. If I had enough allowance saved up, maybe we made a trip to GameStop to pick out a new game. So that being said, Banjo just wasn't a game on my radar. None of my friends had it, none of my relatives had it. Games like Pokemon, Mario, or Zelda had a much higher presence in our circle. But hey, better late than never. I'm so glad I eventually picked up a physical copy and got to eventually share this experience with you all. And I'm relieved to know current gamers have a chance to play this game on Nintendo Switch Online, keeping the tradition alive. Unlike some games